Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Barry Pierpoint. I'm the chairman of this committee, and my vice chairman, Councillor Mike Gilbert, is to my right. Before we move into the preliminary items of this evening's agenda, I need to run through a few housekeeping details. I'd like to remind everyone in attendance this evening that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Please ensure that you're addressing this meeting, that you do so through the microphone system at all times. Please also ensure that you speak into the microphones closely and clearly as possible. Before I go to item 1, can I just ask you to make sure that your phones are switched off? And when officers are giving reports, can you refer to the page numbers that you're talking about so we can follow you during the course of the meeting? Thank you. We'll now move to part 1 of the agenda, the preliminaries. Any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman. We've got apologies from Councillor Izard, and we've also got an apology from Councillor Richard Austin, who is being substituted this evening by Councillor Stephen Woodley.
Are there any declarations of interest? Does any members wish to declare an interest in respect of any items on this agenda? None? Thank you. Do I have permission to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of April 2025? Agreed? Thank you. The rest in a minute. Right. Are there any outstanding actions from the last meeting?
The action sheet from the meetings on the action sheet from the meeting on 22nd of April was circulated with the agenda, and there are no outstanding actions.
Got a question there from yourself.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on action 1 minute 55, if I can, which is the matter about the Hartwood Leisure contract. I'm sorry to come back to this because I think I have raised it before, but it's really encouraging to hear that there are a system of KPIs agreed at the start of the year. What I want to understand is how and in what way those relate to the contractual requirements of Hartwood Leisure. KPIs can be about day-to-day and emerging issues rather than what the operator is actually required to do. So I'm really just seeking a level of reassurance from officers on that point, if we can, please.
Is anybody here who can answer that one for us?
Mr. Chairman, I will take that forward to officers and we'll get a response following the meeting.
Yeah, we'll take that up. So also, Councillor Cantwell, you've got a question as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On page 9, bullet point 5 at the top, it was myself who queried the street lighting decarbonisation, and I couldn't see that in the action sheet sent to us. And so I'm just hoping officers could provide us a timescale on when we could hear back on that.
You need a timescale on that one?
Yes, it'd be good to know when we can hear back on.
Can we record that for a timescale, please, and come back to the next meeting with that one as well? Are there any other questions or queries on those items at the moment? No? Good, I can move on then. Right, that concludes preliminaries. We'll now move to part 2 of the agenda on the agenda items. One of our members raised an issue with me as the chairman of this committee about the Austin Town Board and seeking some assurance on the projects and the capital projects and spending and so on. And I thought it was best if we asked Pranali to come along, who's responsible for that area, to give us an explanation how all this works. I was on the town board myself, and I'm quite convinced and assured that there is lots of scrutiny and governance on all the spending on those projects. I came off in May. So I'm going to introduce Pranali to have a few words and explain a bit about the town board, the operation, the spending, the governance, and so forth. So Pranali, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me. I apologize, I haven't got a paper for you, but I have got just a couple of slides to share, if that's okay with you. Just bear with me, please. Are you able to see this? Yeah. Okay, so Boston Town Board, it was set up specifically for having an oversight over delivery of the Towns Fund projects. So Towns Fund, we received about 21.9 million back in August 21. And the whole purpose of the Towns Board, it was part of the government directive that came along with the funding, that it had to be an external stakeholders board chaired by a private sector chair. And that was to provide oversight, but also steer and influence the delivery of those projects and giving back recommendations to the council, because ultimately council is the accountable body. Now, as part of those internal governance system, we have our own major projects board that looks after our own direct delivery projects. The town board oversees all the projects, so not all the projects within the £21.9 million pot are being delivered by ourselves as a council. So that's the distinction worth keeping in mind. The kind of updates are provided as part of the budget process to council, cabinet and scrutiny committees on regular basis, but also there is government monitoring in place. So there are 6 monthly updates provided to the government on every penny spent. So there is good amount of assurance on all levels of governance for all these projects. But just to give an understanding that we had about 7 projects, as you can see, the Boston Leisure, the Mayflower College campus, St. Botolph's Library and Lighting project, the Center for Food and Fresh Produce Logistics, which was as part of University of Lincoln grant funding project. There was Blanken Memorial Hall refurbishment, Healing the High Street, which included the refurbishment of short fryers as well as some of the shop frontages within the town centre. And the last is the Boston railway station refurbishment. So all these projects are up and running. Not a single project is highlighted as a red risk on our risk registers. The only project which is slightly amber currently is the Healing the High Street, and that is also we are hoping that by the end of this month will turn into green, because we have agreed all the heads of terms for full commitment of all the funding available, and the grant funding agreements are being processed through the legal channels. So that's the only project which is got a little bit of spend left over. But apart from that, all projects are up and running, delivering on ground, and we are very confident that the government deadline of March 26 for commitment or contractually commitment of all projects will be received. So that's the Boston Towns Fund project. I will take this opportunity to just very quickly identify, because there could be a little bit of confusion. There is another pot of funding, which is the Levelling Up Fund Round 2, which relates to the Boston Rose Garden Square Master Plan, which included the Public Ram Works, the Civic Hub and the Crown House. And again, all these projects, as you are all aware, that are up and running. And again, commitment by March 27 is not an issue. And just one more slide to identify is the Levelling Up Partnership funding, which is another 17 million, about 16.9 million that we received last year. We entered into the MOU with the government in September last year. And that includes all these different 10 or 11 projects, and those grant funding agreements are being sorted as we speak. So there are 3 different funding schemes, but I understand the focus for this meeting was on the Towns Fund, which is overseeing just these projects as identified. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Pranali. That's very kind of you. We will open the floor for questions. Any councillors want to raise any questions with Pranali? Councillor Anton Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want a clarification on Boston Leisure. You have the total of 11 million. However, you have, I think, 12, and you have another one. If you go back to it, is that the correct total of funding? Because just
So Boston Leisure Project, and you will have to excuse me for not having all the details at hand, but 7 million is committed from Levelling Up Partnership funding. 3 million is committed from the Towns Fund for leisure. And I think the rest is our own funding, unless I'm wrong, and Brendan will tell you more about it.
no, just on the first slide, the numbers
Sorry.
you have
Should
seen
I
maybe is too
bring
far.
it back just a
Yeah,
minute?
please, if you can.
Yeah, just a second. Yeah,
You have Towns Fund grant award.
yeah,
Is
that's
it 2
about
million?
3 million, 2.9, yes.
2.9, and then match funding is 11,720, 731, and then total funding is 12,020,000. Is that correct?
No, that is obviously a mistake. I apologize.
It should be, I think, 13 something. Or
Yes,
14.
yes, it would be. Yes, I apologize for that.
Happy, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Gideon.
Thank you. I've been asked to ask who the what members are on the board, who the officers of the board are, and where they're brought from. If that makes sense.
So,
I don't really think that's relevant in this question, to be honest. I'm not being unkind. We're looking at governance here, not who's been appointed. I hope you don't mind me saying that. I think we could be sitting here all night asking who's on the board. There's about 40 to 50 people. So I don't really want to go down that route, if you don't mind. I'm sticking to questions about governance and assurance on any projects that you want information for, I hope you don't mind. Councillor Woodliff.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm interested about Boston Railway Station, and has that project been completed? I noticed it was July 25, isn't that right? So is that project complete?
it's due to completion soon. It is on site. The work's going on, and hopefully will complete soon.
Okay, Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woodliff. Anybody else? Councillor Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that Jeff Mulder is under a lot of repairs, and it may take 18 months. And my question, is there any money from our funds, total funds, going for that project? Because as we know, Jeff Mulder is leased to another company.
Apart from the 3 million from Towns Fund and the 7 million from Levelling Up Partnership funding going to Jeff Mulder, I think I haven't got any further details at hand on that, so I'll have to come back to you.
Thank you, because I'm pretty sure that Jeff Mulder swimming pool and other places will be closed for 18 months. So if you can get anything, and email me, I will be very grateful to know. Thank you.
Can I ask you where you got the 18 months from? Because you're giving us a statement here on this committee where officers aren't saying it's going to close for 18 months. And I'd be interested to know where you get your 18 months from.
It's easy, Mr. Chairman, because they go there frequently 4 times a week. And friends of mine, they go to the swimming pool and they were rejected from going to the swimming pool. They didn't know anything. And they told him that the swimming pool will be closed for the next 18 months. And also I asked one of the managers. So
it's very kind of you, and I'll get them to check that out. If the swimming pool is closed for 18 months. Yes,
and as I will add to it, nobody knows. They didn't email anyone. I didn't receive an email from them, so nobody knows.
Okay. Councillor Woodliff.
Thank you, Chairman. As I understood it, originally the amount of money supplied for the railway station was 2.2 million, and it was £250,000 from East Midlands Railways or whatever. And here I look at the figure there, so it adds up to 3 million. So there's another £500,000 that's been added to that. I think, anyways, from my recollection of it. Is there a reason why it cost more money than the original speculation? So I can remember when we sat in and discussed this. I mean, it was the Jakeman Centre, because COVID was on. I'm quite sure. So I'm sure that the amount of money allocated for the railway station was 2.2 million or whatever from the fund, and 250,000 from the railway company. So that would have made 2.5 million. So the new cost is 3 million. That's £500,000 more. Is there a reason why? And well, is there a reason why? That's the question, isn't it?
So the town's funding towards railway station project is 2.475, so just shy of 2.5 million. The rest is a match from other sources.
Okay, happy with that? Any more questions before we move on? No, thank you. Pranali, thank you very much for coming along this evening. If there's any other questions or anything else comes up, we'll get them to look into it. And I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and you do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Enjoy the evening. God bless. Thank you. Right, we'll move on. So the committee is asked to note and comment on the briefing. We've done all that, so everybody's happy. It's all been recorded by officers. The internal audit and report opinion 2024-25, pages 15 to 30 on the agenda. Item 2 is that report, and starts on page 15. And I'm going to ask the audit manager, Mark Harrison, who's in attendance. Would you like to present this, Mark?
Good evening, Chair. It's not going to be me that's going to be presenting this tonight. It's the head of internal audit, Claire Goonough, who is on the screen there. And Claire is the author of the report and will be presenting the report. Thank you.
I wondered who that was. It says DL underneath that lady. There is it. So she changed the name halfway through the meeting. Sorry, beg your pardon. I was going to call you something else rather than Claire. Welcome.
That's all right. I answer to all sorts of things. So I think DL is somebody else. That's not me.
I wondered who it was. Carry on.
So good evening, everybody. For those who've not met me, my name, as Mark said, is Claire Goodenough, and I am your head of internal audit. Apologies, I can't be with you there in person alongside Mark this evening, but I had an operation and I'm unable to drive certain distances yet, so I'm working up to it. So hopefully I'll be with you later in the year. The report I present to you this evening covers the statutory requirements relating to audit quality, audit conformance, and the approach that we've taken for my audit opinion. My audit opinion takes into account the results of consultancy work as well as assurance work alongside other governance documents from the council. There were 2 consultancy-based assignments as part of the 24-25 agreed audit plan, and the outcome of those and the advice arising from those has also been included to form my opinion. Page 22 contains the framework that I used to determine my opinion assessment against, and a review of the framework did not result in any changes that I introduced when I first started, which enables the committee to make a direct comparison between last year's opinion and the year before's opinion. So it gives you a little bit of continuity. My opinion is included on page 23 and provides an adequate assurance against the ratings for governance, risk and the control environment for the council. This is a positive outcome from the report, from the assurance work that we've carried out, and this section of the report also includes a brief statement on suggested improvements to improve oversight and procedures for outsourced activities. The suggestions are not systemic, and as a result, they have not sufficiently impacted negatively upon my opinion of the governance, risk and control environment. Pages 24 to 27 contain additional comment on each of the elements of my opinion, along with summarised information on the 2 limited assurance reviews carried out during the year. Our performance indicators on page 29 show that overall client feedback has been very good. Unfortunately, our performance measures have not met my expectations, and I'm expecting the change of audit manager will help to improve these for our delivery throughout the current year, which is 25-26. I will maintain oversight of the changes that Mark will introduce and be there to offer support to the committee or to Mark and the team as required. And then finally, Appendix 1 on page 30 lists the audit work that's been carried out throughout the year under the definitions for each of the assurance ratings that have been awarded. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report, the process that I use, or the statutory functions that underpin this report.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'll start off the first one. I can see we've got limited assurance on significant gaps and weaknesses on non-compliance were identified. Have they been dealt with now? Do you know? Has there been a follow-up on that or not?
There hasn't been a follow-up as yet. Part of the changes, so with Matt leaving and Mark being appointed to the role, part of the changes are to bring our delivery for yourself up into line with what we deliver for other areas of our delivery, which is maintaining about the council and our school parties. So part of that process will formalise the follow-up review that we do, and Mark will speak to the corporate leadership team, the senior leadership team, on what that looks like going forwards, so that the committee are better informed when we've done our review of whether actions that have been agreed have been successfully implemented or not.
Yeah, because I'm concerned about the time you find these incidents or activity and to the time somebody puts something in place to remedy them, because that's what I'm interested in, is how long is it taking to get these things changed or put into place, and the actual assurance to make sure it's all working properly and correctly. So that's something I'm keen to understand. Are there anybody else want to ask any questions of Claire? Yeah, Councillor Middleton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm overlapping a little bit with yourself here, Chairman, in that these two things, these limited assurance aspects, it seems to me that we've given the job of sorting out and placing our insurance contracts with companies that are capable of insuring our assets. But it seems to me that PSPS failed miserably in carrying out any of the procedures that they should have done in placing those contracts. But I can't, if it's that bad, how is it that Boston Borough Council actually placed or gave PSPS the work when they were so badly placed to do it?
So I can't comment on the rationale as to why something was given to somebody. Part of the work that we do is we go in and we look at the systems, processes and controls that are in place for that delivery, and this is the outcome of that work. So the reasons as to why it was presented to somebody and whether they had the skills to deliver that or not at that point of assessment isn't something that we can, from an audit perspective, make a comment on. Our purpose is to go and look at those processes so that senior management and committee members can make a determination on the steps to take as we move forwards. So it probably sounds like a bit of a non-answer, but it's not intended to be a non-answer. It's just to give you that understanding of it's about our assessment of systems and processes that are in place.
And if a company fails to deliver either on time or a bad design or bad processes or just fails to deliver on time for whatever reason, is there some way we can claw back costs? I mean, I come from the private sector where we would have a 5% of the contract for being a week late on starting up a steel plant. So if we were late, we would be expected to repay 5% of that contract. When PSPS completely fail to follow any procedure, is there no comeback from that? What's going to hurt PSPS to make them deliver?
So there's 2 points to that, Councillor Middleton. There's the aspect of it's around the contract, so whatever contract is in place, but there's also the part of Boston Borough Council officers overseeing that contract relationship and making sure that they have sight and oversight and adequate engagement with whatever the officers of the partnership are trying to pull together. So I think your questions would be best placed towards senior management to understand those two factors, which then feed into the sort of questions that you're looking at. It will be a different environment being public sector. And it's less likely, I'm not saying impossible, but it's less likely that a public sector contract would have that type of financial clause within it, because it's not normally something that is there. However, I haven't seen the contract, and part of the actual audit report that was fed back to senior leaders talked about those engagement channels and how they can improve the communication between the two sides of the contract to make sure that both are capable of delivering the requirements of them. So that's oversight and assurance alongside delivery by PSPS.
I'm going to jump in there and ask Brendan to come in here. He's the 151 officer and is it finance director. So Brendan, I'd like you to just come in and clarify, please.
Thank you, Chair. A few issues perhaps to clarify here. The first is that adequate doesn't sound a very impressive opinion, but when you look at how it's presented in the hierarchy of opinions, it's the current term for what used to be called good, in my view. So the spread of audit opinions that the committee has before it this evening, many councils will be highly envious. So we mustn't get the impression that the council is doing very badly as part of this review. The second point is that members are likely familiar with the process that operates. So the audit report produces agreed recommendations. They are agreed with management with a timescale, and the process operates so that all of those are executed within timescale. And the purpose of the follow-up audit that we ask our colleagues in internal audit to do is to find out that all of those have been implemented. Now, two other things have happened with particular reference to insurance. First of all, the insurance contracts across the partnership have been subject to a tender process. That has been very well executed. It has been done in an exemplary way. So that's a very good thing to see in the context of a service that was in need of improvement as described. And the other issue on bank reconciliation is that the bank reconciliation, again, has been dealt with and brought up to date. So there is a lot of positive movement here. To pick up the last point made by Councillor Middleton, we need to remember that this is a TECL company. It is not a company that is separate from the council. So we own it as a partnership. And in addition, and therefore, if we were to penalise it, we're really penalising ourselves and just moving wooden dollars around the system. We need to operate with our TECL company in an atmosphere of partnership and cooperation. And I'm delighted at the way that the company has responded to the recommendations in terms of bank reconciliation. And I'm very pleased at the progress that's being made with insurance. However, in addition to that, the leadership team has commissioned a service review of the insurance service. This is something the partnership does on an ongoing basis to make sure that the best possible value is being drawn out of the arrangements for service delivery. And so in the months ahead, there will be a service review of insurance, and I'd be very happy to bring the results of that back here in due course if you wish, Chair.
Okay, thank you for the answer on that one, Brendan. Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Claire. I just want to be completely clear on page 26. Again, this is about insurance. I want to be perfectly clear in my own mind about what has happened. Are we saying that PSPS has outsourced an insurance contract to an external provider called TRF? Is that correct?
Chair, I think that's a question for the audit author rather than myself.
Well, I think we need an answer to it, because the performance that it's describing leads me to question whether that contract is still in place. It isn't really very clear. We talk about a contract retendering exercise being postponed for a year. So I think we need to be clear about what is actually happening.
I'm going to ask for that question to be logged and noted, and then we have some answers back at the next meeting, because clearly we're unhappy. Some of us are unhappy about the situation that has arisen on this insurance. So nobody seems to be able to give us a clear answer this evening. So that is an answer that we'll be looking for in our next meeting. and it'll be obviously noted and investigated and come back to you. Are there any more questions for? Councillor Woodliff.
Thank you, Chairman. Please excuse my ignorance, but when I'm looking at the word adequate, I mean, I like things to be defined in a way I can understand. So it's, if I look at page 22, adequate insurance, the control framework is adequate. And to me, that's defining adequate as adequate. I think really the question is, what does adequate really mean? Does it mean satisfactory? Does it mean, good or excellent, or what? Does it mean satisfactory?
So from an audit perspective, we align our assurance ratings with the industry standard, and adequate means fit for purpose, satisfactory, reasonable. So it's doing what it should do. There is a higher category, which is where we see absolutely outstanding work. We have very few recommendations for improvement, and that would be sort of a substantial level. And then we have two lower categories, and those two lower categories are where things aren't where they should be. So whilst adequate sounds like a very mundane, boring word, it means it is doing exactly what it's designed to do, and it is fit for purpose. And as Brandon said earlier, there are a number of councils who would give their right ear to have an adequate assurance rating. You are fortunate to be in that position.
Woking Borough Council, do you think they would fit into that category?
I couldn't possibly say.
Right.
Okay. Right. Anything else from you, Councillor?
Yes, I suppose come back to that. I suppose really was in the insurance side of things, wasn't it? But I suppose that's been covered.
It's been covered enough as it is. We've got nothing else we can talk about.
Now,
you can understand, Claire, that some of the members around this table, word adequate doesn't really mean satisfactory or good or whatever Brendan said. It might be a good idea in future if we could have just a little keynote that assurance means this, that means that, and that means that. So we've got a better understanding. I think that's the problem we've got here, is we're reading stuff that doesn't give us a good understanding. And your interpretation of assurance, okay, is one thing. My interpretation might be different, and somebody else's interpretation might be different again. That's the issue where we've got a problem here. When we're reading these reports and we're not really sure what you're saying. That's what I'm just trying to say to you, summing up what the committee have brought up this evening.
If the committee want to look at there is a framework in there for what adequate means. And obviously that comes from an audit stance. We have to come from an audit stance because we are about risk, and we are about residual risk, and we are about the level of findings that we have. If you just have a look on page, I want to say it's page 23 of the pack. Let me just have a quick look. It does give you that framework. It is page 22, sorry, and it gives you what substantial assurance from a head of audit assurance level means, and what an adequate means. And it says the control framework is adequate, and controls to mitigate risk operate effectively, although some controls may need to improve to ensure business objectives are met. So it gives you what that means. So it's already in that report for you. It's just making sure you lift my opinion back into what that actually means. So I include it for you for ease of everybody, so you can all understand what it means.
Okay, that's been noted. Thank you very much. Councillor Cantwell.
Yeah, thank you. Just two quick things from me. It's good to see that Treasury Management got a substantial assurance. So I think, Sean, you deserve a big pat on the back for that. But I would echo the comments made about the reconciliations and insurance. And I think when it comes to our 25-26 audit, we really shouldn't be seeing that again on limited insurance. It should be adequate or substantial. So I think that's something we certainly need to keep an eye on for next time, and make sure PSPS get it solved.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cantwell. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, on page 27, well, on page 25, there's reference to the auditor's opinion that the council has a risk framework in place which meets entry requirements for routine management. That a bit like adequate doesn't sound particularly exciting, but sounds like we're at the basic level, but we could go further in terms of improving the quality. And then on page 27, there's reference to difficulties gaining access to unrestricted data, unrestricted access to data, control systems and information, which adversely affected your key performance indicators. I wonder whether you've got any comment to make and how confident you feel that won't be repeated next year.
So it has been an issue this year. I think it comes down to partly our fault as an audit team, because that hasn't been progressed at the speed I would have expected that to be progressed. That has now been raised with your section 151, and Mark, Brandon and I will work together to make sure we have the access that as internal audit we should have. It has resulted in the year that we've been looking at, it has resulted in delays to our delivery, having to wait for walkthroughs with access to data for people within the partnership, rather than us just having that access to be able to find our own sampling and our own testing that we can do without that walkthrough. That does result in delays, and it results in delays before we can verify and sign off our draft reports, which is part of what's impacted on our delivery with the low performance indicators that we've got. I am confident that the change in management from our perspective, so to Mark fully understands my expectations. Mark is very clear on having seen what we deliver for Lincolnshire County Council and how well that works and how smoothly that operates. Mark is very comfortable in introducing that to you as one of our clients, as the Borough Council, and I am confident that Mark and Brendan together will be able to take that forwards so that we will not be in that position next year or this year as this year unfolds.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Does anybody else want to raise any more questions before we move on? Yeah, Councillor Middleton.
Again, just coming back to what you just said there, we've got a new team coming in for the audit, and I presume that was just coincidence that our last officer moved on. Is there a plan in place now then to make sure that we don't get some company that PSPS pluck out of the air, give a job to, who absolutely fulfill none of the requirements in placing that contract, monitoring it, or anything else? Have we got a plan in place that's going to stop that? Now we've got a new team.
So I think probably Brendan might be best placed to answer that in relation to what the internal plans are for sort of PSPS delivery and that contract oversight. From an audit perspective, we will deliver the plan that we agreed in the first place, and Brendan and I are due to meet later this week to look at what that looks like going forwards, to see whether there's been any change in risk profile. But if that's something you specifically want us to look at, then that's something that I can unpick with Brendan to see where that falls within your risk process.
My only concern is that if we just do the same again, we'll get the same output. So I'd like you to be saying something like, yeah, we've got a new brush come in, really keen, lots of new ideas, things won't be done the same. We will be on top of these problems and ensure that we'll have a smooth run assurances next year.
So it's a little bit for me to say what will happen. What I can assure you is we will deliver our audit plan, but the actions that arise as a result of that audit plan, from the findings or from the level of risk that we find, it's not for our internal audit team to put right. It's for the internal audit team to find those issues, to assess those issues and agree management action. It's for the management to deliver against that. So it's the management that will determine whether we encounter the same problems or not. It's not for internal audit to deliver that. We will deliver the assurance ratings that you will be looking for. Does that make sense?
I get that, Claire. That is correct, and I agree with what you're saying. I'm going to ask Brendan to come in again now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, hopefully from what's already been said, in that the audit recommendations have been working through, an insurance tender has been successfully executed. I think associated with that activity, it's reasonable to assume that the partnership is operating to a plan. In terms of the detail of that and when it will be complete, I think given the concern that members have, we'll come back with a written response on that, and we'll do that before the next meeting.
Thank you. And I'm glad that both you and Claire have taken in the concerns of some of the committee members, which is good, and no doubt we'll get some feedback off you on the next meeting. I'm going to say no more questions now. I think we're going to move on, and I'm going to thank you, Claire, for coming this evening and presenting that report. And I hope you get better soon. And you know, I'd like to see you back on your bicycle or in your car, and able to get down to Boston, and we can see you. But thank you very much for presenting that report. Do appreciate it, and we've taken note of what you've said, and I hope you've taken note of what we said as well. Thank you very much.
I just add something before we close this, if that's okay, Chair.
Of course it is.
Just to say, so whilst you were talking, I've just looked at the working papers for the insurance, and the auditor has reported that it was outsourced. So PSPE did arrange for somebody else to deliver that. So it was just to clarify, the audit report as it states is correct.
That's kind of you. And I'm going to ask Brendan to look into that now as the 151 officer to see whether there's any questions or any answers he can come back from the questions we presented at this committee meeting today. So thank you very much and thank you very much, Brendan, for your input as well. Do appreciate it. We're going to move on.
Thank you,
Have
Chair.
a good evening. Take care.
You.
Thank you. So the committee is asked to note and comment on the report. Everybody's happy with that, and we've actually made notes of all the comments, and we're going to come back with some answers at the next meeting. We're going to go on to item 3 now. This is on page 31. It's the Q4 Q4 risk report 2024-25, and I'm going to ask Suzanne to present that report to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual quarterly update on risks as at the end of March 2025. Paragraph 1.5 is the first one I would draw your attention to. That picks up the training session that we talked about at the last meeting. So we're proposing a date for that training, a date for your diary of Monday, the 15th of September, starting at 6 o'clock here in the committee room, so that we can go through the principles from the framework very quickly and then go through the risk registers line by line in more detail than we get chance to at the regular meetings. So that's the 15th of September, and that appointment will come round to you. It'll serve two purposes. It'll be both training, but also a really good chance for us to review the risks, the wording, the scores, the rationale behind it, things that we wanted to look at in detail. So I'm really looking forward to it, and that's in September. For this evening, the section 2 of the report covers the strategic, partnership and fraud risks as usual. So there's been a thorough review of the wording and the scores in Q4, and the updates since the last quarter are set out in the tables from pages 32 to 36. We've recently had an internal audit as well, which is just coming through to the end, and there's some recommendations in there for improving the way that we do that covering table in that report. So at your Q1 report, there'll be some improvements to that table. Just to draw your attention to some of the content of those tables, the depot risk, which is at the top of page 33, that risk has reduced from high to medium. There's a lease agreement which is now in place. That was in place at the end of the financial year, so the risk was reduced, and we expect that risk to reduce further in Q1 when that lease is in place. And there's a new risk there to note around local government reorganisation. That's under review again. The wording will be updated again for Q1, and it's moving quite quickly as you'd expect. Two of the risks, the fraud risks, are on page 35. Two of those have reduced. So procurement, due to the improved controls following the procurement card audit, that remains a medium risk, but the score is reduced from an 8 to a 6. And also council tax, credit refund and income fraud risk. The likelihood for that one has reduced from a 3 to a 2 because of the checks and controls that are in place, and that remains a medium risk, but it has reduced overall. I'm happy to take any questions that I can try to answer tonight, or if there are items that we really want to get into detail on, we can put them on a list for September so that we can look at the areas that you're particularly interested in. But happy to take those questions.
Thank you for that report, Suzanne. I'll start with Councillor Cantwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I'll probably have a separate conversation with you outside the meeting as well, but for the civil contingency risks, BBC 06. It's just to note that since especially the last report, there has been a number of battery storage projects which have come into particularly my ward. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you, but I think that risk needs to be completely reviewed, because at the moment there is no requirement for civil contingency planning around those sites, and the environmental and toxic nature of them means if there ever was an incident, the entire borough would know about it. So it'd be good to kind of have a review of that. And just out of interest, when new technology like this comes through, do say the planning team refer things to the risk register that they think, we appreciate it's not our remit, but it is something we probably need to be aware of going forward. Is that line of communication existing, or?
Yes, the planning team and all service areas, if there are new risks to identify, and particularly thinking of that one, that would be the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum as well. But yeah, if we could catch up and you could give me the detail, I can make sure we pick that up. Thank you.
Anything else, Councillor? It's fine. Okay, thank you. We're going to Councillor Gilbert then.
Right, it's a very, very small point. I just wonder whether 28 should appear in the risk score matrix in the top right-hand corner. It doesn't appear to at the moment. In terms of on page 33.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Noted. Okay, thank you very much. Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We were going to ask a few questions about the risk register, but as you've arranged the session, that's really helpful, and I think very encouraging to hear. So I think most of what we were going to ask we'll leave till then. I did just want to ask about on page 41, BBC 19, which is the staff retention risk. That's been deleted, and I couldn't work out why. Could you explain that, please?
Yeah, sorry, I should have included that in my summary. So it's duplicated. It's in the council's own register and in the partnership register. So we've decided that it would be better just to be in one place. In the partnership one, it's across the board, so it's in there.
Gideon.
Thank you, Chair. On this may well be me, but on BBC 16 on page 41, it reads the the alignment and delivery plan in place to help manage the work programme services when bringing forward new initiatives to consider what the capacity required and the need to bid for capacity if it can't be accommodated within existing resources. This matter was discussed at an internal conference. The senior managers' email appears to be the biggest pressure, and services are considering how they best manage this. Services have been informed that they can bid into the transformation reserve for short-term capacity if they have a suitable proposal. And as I say, it may well be me, but I don't quite understand that. Sorry.
We will be looking at the wording as well, because sometimes I think as we add on each quarter, it becomes too wordy. But basically, on the capacity side, we have regular meetings with the managers to remind them that there are different ways to bid for capacity. So it might be if you're putting a new project in place, you want to think about including the capacity to run that when you put the project forward. But we will look at the wording of that, especially as you read it out. I can hear that that's not quite. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay with that? Are you okay with that? I agree with it. It's, you're trying to decipher what's being said, but anyway, Suzanne's going to do that for you. Councillor Anton Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first thing is just to make a point, basically something I noticed, because on page 33, when you talk about the depot, you say that it was medium, now is basically going down because it used to be high. No, it's going to, yeah, it used to be high, now it's medium. It would be very helpful for us to know what's the previous one, so it will be easy for us to understand it. That's one thing. Secondly, what I want to ask is page 39, because on all the health, local economy budget, all of it, we don't have, the action doesn't have any date or anything, because all of them not applicable. Is there any reason for that?
Yeah. So on the first one, yes, that's moving the high to medium, that's what we're going to improve, and that was an internal audit recommendation, that we need more information in that covering report to explain how things have moved. So we will pick that up. And then the second part on was it the depot?
Yeah, the depot, because what I would like, it will help us and make it clear for us, is to have the previous one.
Yeah.
So if it was medium or was high or was probably low, and then we have medium, so that show us the progress and where we are and where we are standing.
Yes, yeah. And the second part, sorry, remind me.
The second part, page 39, most of the tables say not applicable is the delivery of, the action basically.
Yeah, so where the treatment is tolerate, we wouldn't normally expect to put an action in place. So if it's treat, there would be an action and a date. If it is that we're tolerating the risk as it stands, we wouldn't put a date in there. But that's one of the areas we can cover at the training, so that we can go through and explain how that works.
Thank you.
Okay, happy with that? Right, Councillor Woodliff. Thank you.
First of all, what time's the training? Is it in the evening or in the on
6
the
o'clock.
15th, isn't it? 6 o'clock. That's right. There's nothing in the report about AI, or more, perhaps importantly, general AI and the impact upon the council going forward. AI is a fast developing strategy, existence, whatever. That's, I think, will have a huge impact upon all council services and so on. And of course, I understand that general AI is when actually these machines think like human beings, which is a pretty horrific thought, I think. But considering some of the human beings I taught in school, it would be horrific. But that's not a matter. I'm online, aren't I? I'm for it now. But we have something about cyber threats. That's one thing. It is actually the impact of AI on processes and so on, and the way management operates going forward. And that may have a huge, I think, probably will have a huge impact on the way councils generally operate. And as for general, I don't understand a lot of it anyway. I know this fight's way beyond me, but I am aware of the fact that the world changes very quickly. But what's happening, I think, in the electronics area is hugely significant for organisations such as ourselves, and that may well have a major impact on the way we operate as a council and other bodies that we operate with. So I don't know whether that's been included into your risk factors and so on. But
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's an interesting prompt, and I hadn't thought of that, so we'll pick that up in the Q1 review.
I think it's an interesting topic and a subject for risk management, and and I thank Councillor Woodley for bringing that up. Something I never thought of, and it is fast moving, and it is changing and evolving. So it's worth a thought anyway, and we'd be interested to know what your thoughts are at a later date. Thank you. Any other questions for Suzanne before we move on? No. Good. So the committee is asked to note and comment on the briefing, which we have done, and the comments have all been recorded by the officers. Thank you, Suzanne, for that report. It's very kind of you. We go on to the annual Treasury report on page 55, and I'm going to ask Sean to present that report to us. Sean, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. At page 55, you have the covering report. And the purpose of this report is to provide members with the annual Treasury report for 2024-25 financial year in accordance with the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountants Code of Practice on Treasury Management to ensure that best practice is maintained. I will go to the main Appendix 1, where the detail of that report is, and we'll start at page 62. During 2024-25, the following reports have been submitted. An annual Treasury strategy in advance of the year, which was received at Council as part of the budget setting report on the 4th of March, a mid-year Treasury update report, Audit and Governance on the 18th of November and Council on the 20th of January, the annual review following the end of the financial year, which is this report. And in addition to this, the Council also receives quarterly Treasury Management update reports on the 14th of October and 22nd of April, I should say, Audit and Governance, not Council. Paragraph 2 at the bottom of page 62 provides details in relation to the Council's capital expenditure and financing for the financial year. And you'll see at the top of the page 63 the table that shows that the actual capital expenditure during the year was 15,257,000, of which 14,853,000 was financed, leaving unfinanced capital expenditure of 404,000, which increases the overall council's underlying need to borrow. Paragraph 3 refers to that underlying need to borrow, which is effectively your historic unfinanced, unpaid for capital expenditure. And you'll see on the table at page 64, at the end of the 31st of March 2025, that historic capital expenditure is £18.5 million, which is a marginal increase from the position at the 31st of March 2024. If you look at the second table on page 64, which refers to the gross borrowing position, the council currently has £1 million worth of borrowing, and that capital financing requirement, borrowing requirement of 18,499,000. So you are considerably under borrowed. In other words, using your council's cash balances rather than taking out external borrowing at this stage. Page 65 shows the treasury position at paragraph 4, and that summarises that borrowing position of £1 million and the underborrowed position of £17.5 million. And then when you add your investments at the end of the financial year of just under £51 million, that shows that you have a overall net treasury position of just under £50 million worth of investments. There are various splits of the investments on page 66, which shows the types of investments, whether they are treasury and non-treasury, the investment duration, and whether those investments are fixed or variable. Paragraph 5 refers to the strategy for 2024-25, and effectively what happened during the year. Bank rate reductions of 0.25 occurred in August, November and February, bringing the headline rate down from 5.25% to 4.5%. And you'll see from that chart on page 67 how that the interest rates available in the market have fallen during the year. Paragraph 5.2 gives a summary of the borrowing strategy and control of interest rate risk, and the table at the bottom of the page 68 shows the borrowing rates for the financial year, and interestingly, borrowing rates have slightly increased throughout the year in contrast to the investment rates that fell during the year. Paragraph 6 refers to your borrowing outturn. So yes, as referred, the council only has £1 million worth of borrowing with State Street at 11.125%, which matures in 2051, and the interest on that loan was £111,250 in the year. Paragraph 7 at the bottom, page 69, refers to the outturn for investments, and you'll see there the reserve balances at the table on the bottom of page 69. There's been an increase in the reserve balances up to just under £54 million, and the main reason for that increase is a result of the capital grants unapplied position, because the council received approximately £19 million worth of grants during the year, which haven't been applied to capital expenditure at the moment. From an investments perspective, the rates achieved on those investments, the Treasury investments achieved a rate of 5.29%. The council's property fund investments achieved a rate of 3.21% for the year, and that gave an overall combined rate of 4.57%. Putting that into numbers, if you look at the overall net position, you had an annual budget of just over £2.1 million. The outturn was just over £2.8 million, giving a surplus of investment income of just over £700,000 for the financial year. There's a paragraph 8, which refers to the economy and interest rates, which was provided by our external treasury advisors, which I don't propose to go to. And on page 72, that provides you a landscape table of the council's property fund investments for the year. And you'll see, based on cost £17.3 million, the overall valuation was 15.236 at the end of the financial year, which is an overall reduction in value of just over £2 million since purchase. But that is during the financial year 2024-25, there has been an increase in value of £231,000, so heading in the right direction. Don't propose to go through any more of the report. The recommendation is that Audit and Governance Committee scrutinise the annual report and make any comments to Council when they consider the document for approval on the 21st of July. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, are there any questions from anyone around the table at all? Councillor Wadley.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Do you think there's any possibility of the the holdings we have are likely to, recover to the value at which we purchased them from? We paid 17 million, didn't we, for these, I believe these assets, and they're now worth what, 15 million? Is there any likelihood, do you think, from your perspective, of those assets, arriving back at the value that they were originally purchased for, do you think?
Yes, as you'll be aware, when we actually took out the investments, the intention is they are long-term investments and valuations do fluctuate. Property values can be volatile and they do fluctuate up and down. And at the moment, we are towards the bottom end of a property price cycle. It depends as to whether they will get back to the original valuation. That depends on how long you are prepared to hold those investments for. But I'm sure that over time they would get back to their original valuations and go above those valuations. But obviously I understand that council's priorities can change, and there is another report at the end of this meeting, an exempt report, which will discuss this.
Can I ask a further question? These property funds, do they hold property all around the world, or is it just do these property funds hold UK property only, or is it do they hold assets in other countries? Whether you know that.
There are global property funds, but the decision that was made by this council was we would only hold property funds for UK property.
So we actually control how our money is applied in these companies.
The actual funds are funds that only invest in UK property.
Right. Okay.
If you wanted to invest in global funds, you would have to choose a different fund.
If that had happened, would we have benefited from that, or is that done like is the slump in property an international issue?
Yes, it can be. The timelines can be different. While property funds are increasing in value in one area, they could be reducing in a different part of the world. But the overall opinion of the council when the decision was made, they only wanted to invest in UK. But yes, property funds valuations will go up and down, and they won't necessarily all go up and down at the same time.
Thank you very much indeed for all that you told us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, are there any more questions from the committee? Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on page 67, we talk about the rates, fixed rate and variable rate. I just want to ask, the fixed rate, is it for a long term or is it for short term? Because once you change the fixed rate to variable, it may go higher.
Yes, when the council places time deposits in the market with financial institutions or local authorities, they generally are up to 1 year and they will be at a fixed rate. But what we do have is we have money on call, short term, to cover our short-term cash positions, and it tends to be those rates that are on a variable rate, and also your property funds are classed as variable because the returns you receive on your property funds vary each quarter.
Just one thing, I'm very pleased to see that we don't have any borrowing, so we are on a safe side, and that's very positive. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Right, I'm going to read the recommendation out then. The recommendation is the Audit and Governance Committee can scrutinise the Annual Treasury Report 24/25 at Appendix 1 and make any comments for consideration by Council when they consider this document for approval at their meeting on the 21st of July 2025. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Danny. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Saviak. Are they all in favour? Can we move to all those in favour? Yep. Any against? Okay, recommendation carried. Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you very much for a lovely report there, great report. Thank you very much, committee, for voting on that one. We'll move on to next one is the annual governance statement, and that's on page 75. I'm going to ask the group manager again, Suzanne Rolfe, to give us that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a standard report to Audit and Governance Committee that we receive each year to provide assurance on the Council's governance framework, and it covers set headings such as vision, codes of conduct and decision making, etc. This report is an update on last year's and includes any changes that have taken place in the last 12 months. I would draw your attention in particular to page 90. of your report pack, and that gives a table of the actions that we set out in the previous year that we would do. You can see that those have been completed or deferred, so I'll just go through those. The in-year monitoring has been completed. That was the first action in the table. The no assurance audit of procurement cards and the limited assurance audit of payroll reconciliation have had their follow-up audits to confirm that the controls have improved. The alignment of the constitutions is on hold pending LGR, and similarly the member development groups will remain at individual councils rather than relaunching partnership-wide. Just over the page then, on page 91, we have the two new actions that are identified for the year ahead. One is around budget setting and the medium-term financial strategy, which is a later item on the agenda, and then potential plans for remote meetings and proxy voting. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you, Suzanne. Are there any questions from members around the table? Any questions? Okay, so it's recommended the committee review and approve the annual governance statement 24-25. Do we have a proposer, please? Councillor Danik, do I have a seconder? Councillor Woodliff. We'll move to a vote. All those in favour, please. Any against? That recommendation is being carried forward. Thank you very much. Now we're on to item 6, the unaudited financial statement 24-25, including the narrative report, pages 93. And I'm going to ask the Deputy Chief Finance Officer, Ellie Stacey, to present that report. Ellie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to present the unaudited financial statements for 24-25. I'm really pleased to report that once again, these were completed in advance of the deadline of the 30th of June 2025. And the AGS annual governance statement, which is just being considered the previous item for the purpose of this agenda, was not included within the appendix, but it is included in the draft financial statements that have been published on the website for the public inspection period. That public inspection period has now commenced, and the KPMG audit has also commenced today. So the team are working really hard to ensure that they've got all of their working papers and the information that they need to undertake that audit in an efficient manner. So the committee considered the accounting policies back in April, where I did inform the committee that there was a new accounting standard, IFRS 16 leases, which came into effect on the 1st of April 2024. That is the main change that members will see from the previous year's financial statements. And the purpose of that new accounting standard is to require the council to recognise what we call a right of use asset on the balance sheet. So in context for Boston, they lease in a handful of houses for temporary accommodation. They are leased as opposed to owned by the council, and therefore the value of those has to be reflected on the balance sheet. There are also a couple of vehicles as well, so that has resulted in an additional asset on the balance sheet of £0.822 million. There is a corresponding lease liability on the balance sheet and also a gain on recognition through the capital adjustment account. One thing I do just want to make clear to the committee is that there is no impact on the taxpayer for any of this, any changes as a result of this new accounting standard. It is purely presentational for the purposes of the financial statements. So the appendix starts on page 99 of the agenda pack, and that is the unaudited financial statements. The first section within that document is the narrative report. And the purpose of this is to provide a summary of the council's financial activities throughout 24-25. This includes, for example, on page 108, the general fund outturn table. So this shows the revised budget for 24-25, which was a balanced budget, and the outturn that was achieved against that was a surplus of £1.015 million. One of the main contributing factors to that is, as we've just heard from the Treasury report, the overachievement on investment income. We've also got the capital financial performance on the following page, page 109, which was underspent against the capital programme of just over £5.7 million. And then on the next page, we've got a summary table that shows the movement in the reserves for the financial year as well. All of the details around the movements between the variances to the budget are included in the Cabinet report, which is being presented on the 9th of July. The next section of the financial statements are what we call the primary financial statements. These start on page 114 of the agenda pack, and the first primary statement is the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. The purpose of this statement is to show the full accounting cost of year for the council to provide all of their services. That's in accordance with generally accepted accounting practices. So it is not the amount to be funded from the taxpayer. It is the total cost providing the council services. And for that reason, you will see quite a significant movement on some of those lines from 23-24 to 24-25. We've got all sorts of accounting adjustments running through this statement, including pensions, revaluations, etc. And also from the first agenda item that you heard from Pranali, where the council doesn't own assets, but it is utilising grant funding to spend on those assets. They are required, as per the SIPFA Code of Practice, to run through the income and expenditure statement. So, for example, on the economic growth line, you'll see quite an increase from previous year on the expenditure, and that is because those grants are being utilised to fund that spend. You'll also see quite a significant movement from taxation non-specific grants on the very bottom line there, from 23-24 to 24-25, and again that is just due to the profiling of when those capital grants are being received. The next primary statement is the movement in reserve statement, and effectively that shows the movement in the council's reserves from the beginning of the financial year to the end of the financial year. The first few columns are the usable reserves that the council can utilise in terms of funding its services, etc. And then the unusable reserves, the second to last column, are those reserves that hold those adjustments. For example, you've got the pensions reserve, you've got the revaluation reserve and the capital adjustment account there as well. So just a couple of points to highlight on here. The capital grants and applied, as Sean mentioned, has increased significantly as capital grants have been received in year but not yet spent on those capital schemes. Therefore, they have been set aside in the capital grants and applied reserve to be utilised in future financial years. And also you'll see there the earmarked reserves has increased by £3.256 million, and that includes the transfer of the surplus against the budget for 24-25. The third primary statement is on page 117, and that is the balance sheet. So effectively that shows the net worth of the council as at 31st of March 2025. One point I would stress on the balance sheet is it is a snapshot as at the 31st of March. If the balance sheet was taken, say, a couple of weeks earlier or a couple of weeks later, due to the profiling of, for example, those capital grants being received and those investments made, profiling of spend, things like that, the balance sheet can swing quite significantly. So please bear in mind that it is a snapshot as at that point in time. Just a couple of key movements from previous year. So you'll see there the first line, property, plant and equipment valuation. So the council's asset valuations have increased from the previous financial year. We've also got the new right of use assets included in there as well. Investment properties also increased in value. Moving down to the current asset section, the short-term investments have increased, again referring back to Sean's report there. And the short-term debtors and short-term creditors have also moved slightly at the end of the financial year as well. The final primary statement is the cash flow statement. So this effectively takes the net surplus on the provision of services, and then we are required to adjust that surplus for all of those non-cash movements to arrive at the cash and cash equivalents figure on the balance sheet of £2.879 million. So the remainder of the document shows the notes that support in further detail those four primary financial statements. I don't propose on going through the notes of the accounts in any great detail. It is a vast document, but if there are any questions, I'll answer them where I can, and if I can't, I'll take them away and provide an answer after the meeting.
Can I say that was a very comprehensive report? I really do very pleased what you said there. It was well set out and well presented. Thank you, Ellie. It's credit to you on that one. Well done. We'll take some questions. Councillor Woodliff.
I got a bit lost actually. I couldn't find the page numbers. I thought we were going to be given the page numbers of where, we were being directed to look.
Ellie did give the page numbers. Yes, as we were going through the report, she was highlighting the page numbers at the same time.
I didn't pick them up.
What's your question you want to ask?
The question is, I want to come back actually. What the question I asked Pranali earlier on was about the Towns Fund and Boston Station. And I said to her, well, I thought I understood that the contribution through the towns fund was 2.4 million. And but the figures in front of her weren't like that, were they? It was 2.5 million and £500,000 from the train company or the rail or Network Rail or whatever they want to call themselves these days.
Are you going to ask the same question you've asked Pranali?
Yes, because if you look on page 109, Boston Station Towns Fund is 2.268 million.
Can I suggest that what we do, we're going to take that question and get some answers for you, because I don't think people have got the answers around the table today. You've already asked Pranali, she hadn't got the answer, and you're asking Ellie, and she hasn't got the answer. I don't think you got the answer, Ellie, have you? I don't think at this stage, no. So we're going to, I mean, it's a good question, get me wrong. Councillor Woodcliffe's question, we're going to get you the answer, what you're looking for. At the moment, we don't have that answer.
And why it's changed.
And why it's changed. Okay, that's taken down. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any more questions, Councillor Cantwell?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, and I'm happy to get an answer at a different time. On page 126, 13, interesting companies and other entities. Apart from PSPS, does the council have any other interesting companies at all?
No, it doesn't. Just its shareholding in PSPS.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ali. That was a very clear report. I just had a couple of points I just wanted to raise. So page 134, the debt impairment on housing benefit. This does sound like a really difficult thing to do, but I just wanted to understand whether the 65% that the officer has allowed, whether that's more or less than last year. It sounds like something you'll have to take away, I suspect.
I will, please. But what I will say is we look at the status of each of those debts in terms of how they are being recovered, and therefore the earlier on in the stages they are of recovery, then obviously the lower the provision we provide, the further we get through that recovery process, the higher the percentage we provide. So there is quite a comprehensive calculation behind that. But in terms of the movement to last year, I think it roughly is in line with where it was, but I will confirm.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be useful to understand that. And if I could ask just one more question, please. Page 104. But it's not really a question. I'm not entirely sure that the wording at the bottom of that page, where it refers to the role of the Audit and Governance Committee, it does say, I'll just read it out. It says, scrutiny of cabinet decisions for 23-24, including the setting of a balanced budget for the next year, has been undertaken by the Audit and Governance Committee. So I don't believe that's our role.
Page I'm talking.
I'm sorry, it's page 104.
104.
Page 104. It's a section headed political structure, and it's the final paragraph.
Okay.
That wording, I think, is not right.
Ellie, do you want to comment on that?
I'll take that one away if that's
Yeah,
okay.
we don't scrutinise decisions. I think we'd scrutinise whether the right procedures are in place, I suppose.
Okay.
That's a way of putting it.
We'll take that question away. Do you have anything else to add to that, Adam, at all?
I think there's some proofreading needed on page 103.
That's all right. Yeah. I don't think we're going to go deep into that one.
No.
Councillor Pryke.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, my voice is going because I haven't used it for a while. Page 134. At the top, consulting actuaries have been engaged to advise us on what's happening to our pension liabilities. And the question I've got is, impact of an asset ceiling is 7.925 million. What is the asset ceiling for pension liabilities?
So it's all to do with the net surplus or deficit on the fund at a given point in time. And if I can provide a written explanation, I will do it much more justice than if I try and explain it here, if that's okay. So if I can come back with a response on that one, is that okay?
Yes, the reason I'm asking is there is a fairly general concern that local authorities' pension liabilities are growing at such a rate that they will prove to be an extremely dangerous liability quite soon And so the more information we have about our own liability, the better.
I think Ellie's going to take that question up anyway for you and come back with it for an answer. That's okay, thank you. Any more questions for Ellie before we move on? Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, just on page 105 at the bottom, I just wonder whether there's another sort of minor typing oversight on there in relation to over the period between April 2024 and December 24, whether that should read Boston. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't know we were doing proofreading as part of the committee this evening, but anyway, that's it's obviously getting us all worked up. Yes, Gideon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 139, other services expenses has gone from around about 15 million to around about 23 million. Is there a breakdown of that at all anywhere? I couldn't find one.
The expenditure that I spoke about in relation to we call it REFCUS, Revenue Expenditure Funded from Capital under statute. So effectively, that's the income that we receive in terms of capital grants that is then spent on, they're not the council's assets, and they have to flow through the income and expenditure statement, and that's where they feature. So that's why that has increased so significantly from the previous financial year.
Okay with that? Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to, on page 109, just on the PE21 Rosegard Square, we have only 1.9 million. The whole project, I think, will be what, 14.8. I just want to understand where it comes to 1.9. Thank you.
That would just be the budget that was set for the expenditure relating to 24-25. So if the scheme spans a longer time frame, then the budget that was allocated for that financial year would just be the 1.9. But I can take it away and provide further breakdown.
Because as we know, it's the budget for it is 14.8, so it's more than that.
Any more questions? No? Good, thank you. The committee is asked to note and comment on the briefing, which we have done. The comments have been recorded by officers. We'll move on now to item 7, which is the budget preparation 26-27, the approach and process. This is on pages 191 and onwards. I'm going to ask the Director of Finance, Officer 151, Brendan Arnold, to present the report. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, Chair. So members are probably thinking, what's this new report that we've got here? So to set that in context, when I arrived in the partnership and here in Boston about 3 months ago, I spent quite a lot of time talking to senior members, members of the cabinets, the executive boards, chief officers, managers and staff who contributed to the budget process, to leaders, chairs of the audit committees and chairs of the scrutiny committees, and tried to draw out some themes that would allow the entire community to have a better experience in setting the 2026 budget, the 26-27 budget. And the key themes that I found are kind of set out in the report. Many of them related to a lack of time to properly consider the budget risks that were in frame, almost a sense that when the budget settlement arrived in late December, that's really when the starting gun went off for the budget, and the vast majority of the work took place in the following 10 weeks or so. And so in order to draw that out and allow all to have a more satisfactory experience, to have more time to think systematically about the cost pressures that might need to be inserted in the budget, and indeed the cost reduction measures that might be available and their consequences if they were needed, we set off a process in June whereby managers were asked to go away and identify the budget pressures that they could forecast. We are currently in July working through a process where managers are looking at possible means of cost reduction and delivering those proposals to a target. And during August, there there is a process of star chamber reviews, those star chambers to be led by chief officers, by members of teams that are not part of the services that are before those panels at any particular time, and also involving the finance portfolio holders and other members from the respective cabinets. And all of that information then will, as part of that star chamber process, be tested. It will, to use language that I sometimes use, have the tyres kicked on those proposals to make sure that where pressures are being put forward, actually they are essential. They relate clearly to the statutory functions of the councils, or if they are discretionary, actually the importance that is associated with those is the topmost importance that can be assigned, to look at the value of those pressures and see if those needs cannot be met in a different way, and so forth. And with regard to cost reductions, making sure that the implications of those reductions have been fully considered and explored, that the impact on stakeholders of all their various kinds has been understood and can be written down and considered. And to make sure as well, looking at it a different way, that the savings that may have been proposed at that point as a result of this work are not being understated. In other words, that the full benefit of the proposal is being fully explored, and making sure also that there is a commercial edge to the decisions that are being presented, and that the council is mindful of the use of business management techniques and considerations in drawing all of that advice to a process. And the way that that will then operate is that those matters will be considered by the executive moving through the autumn position. Now, usually it would be the case that the final settlement arrives in December, but civil servants have said very recently that actually the budget settlement is set to be received by late November this year. If that happens, I will note the moment, because it will be the first time in my quite long career that that's ever happened. And equally, we are set to see a multi-year settlement, which will be very welcome. It's been some considerable number of years since one of those has been visited on the local government sector. And so we will be looking to be able to try and bring matters to a focus earlier than usual. An important point of all of this is actually the role of Audit and Governance Committee, which is where we are tonight, as opposed to overview and scrutiny. And the overview and scrutiny process is generally, in councils who do this very well, takes place after Christmas when the budget settlement has arrived. There is a very considerable review where cabinet members appear before the scrutiny committee with their suite of draft budget papers, and where inquiry is launched by that scrutiny committee in some considerable detail as to the characteristics of what is going on. Questions can be asked. The whole thing is available on the internet, and the residents of the council area can see all this happening. That is excellent governance, and we are indeed planning for each of the three councils in the partnership to enjoy such an event in the first half of January, I think, in most cases. The role of audit and governance is perhaps a different one, and that's why this report is here today. And if you look at the recommendations, we're asking you to note the report, but equally to advise whether you are assured that the process that I've described, and which is described in more detail in the report, that you are assured that that will deal with the headline risks that are in the frame, and feel that it is a suitable and full process that allows sufficient time for the council to take decisions, which in some cases may be challenging, but having time to reflect fully on the consequences of that. What I should also say is that the timetable that is contained in the report also provides for time to consult on budget proposals in the borough, and that using this approach, that can be done to a standard that is certainly commensurate with what is usually seen to be satisfactory and fit for purpose elsewhere in the sector using best practice. So very, very happy to take any questions on the report. At the end of the day, Chair, I would like members to feel that this is a reasonable process and that you're able to take a level of assurance from the approach that has been described. If you're not in that position, then the request is that you let me know why, so that I can go away and tweak the approach to provide the assurance that I want you to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that report. Can I just ask you a question on page 195 on item B2? You tell us here that audit committees will receive a report from yourself setting out the overall process. Do I take it this is the report we're talking about?
This is the report, yes, Chair.
Just clarify, because I thought it was end of July. We're weeks away from the end of July, so I'm just clarifying. That's okay. Thank you. I take questions from anybody. Right.
It's really interesting. This is a new process, isn't it? And in the report you refer to the fact there are no implications in terms of staffing. How have you managed to achieve that? Because it's quite remarkable, given that it is a much more robust stress testing process.
Yes, I think this is a function really of allowing more time for the process to unfold. So in the past, as I understand it, a lot of this activity was a lot more compressed in terms of the time scale that it took place within. So as we started much earlier and effectively have begun the process from the beginning of June, that has meant that there is simply more time available. And I think also I would say that we have a management community that are eager to make progress in this way and see the benefits of it. Equally, I would like to note the support that my colleagues in the finance team, which is embedded here in PSPS, have afforded to this. So we have a head of steam of enthusiasm and zeal to make a good job of this at officer level. And I think also actually in the minds of many members that I have spoken to, this is felt to be something that will serve all of the councils in the partnership, including Boston, well. So I think it's a question of more time and more enthusiasm, Chair.
Does that actually impact on the officers though, to produce information, the more tighter deadlines, anything like that? Is that going to create a problem? Because sometimes in the past, prior to you being here, we've had reports given to us at short notice where we've had difficulty getting some information out. I just want to make sure that we're not putting any extra pressure onto officers to do things that they can't deliver. That's my question.
On the contrary, because of the extra time that's being afforded, the risk of that is much, much lower using this model. And it operates successfully in many other councils with that risk not eventualising. Thanks, Chair.
I'm very assured now you said that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Woodliff.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Chair. I suppose my only thought is that we live in unstable times and we really don't know what's likely to happen financially in the country as a whole. And I understand there's planned to be a budget, is it somewhere in September, actually with significant tax rises and so on, which could have an impact on everything we do. So we could make all sorts of plans up to now, and then the government throws the googly as such, and then we're in trouble again. So I'm nothing to say against this, except that I approach it with caution because we really don't know what's going to happen financially. But I suspect bad things are coming down the line. So yes, make all the plans you want, but I suspect that you may find that many of your plans that you've already set up or the officers have set up may suddenly be thrown into abeyance by what's the name? Rachel Accounts, I think her name, isn't it? Sorry.
Yes, I'll let Brendan come back on that one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, a couple of things. First of all, one always proceeds with significant amounts of caution in setting any budget as complex as a local authority budget. It is not an exercise for the faint-hearted, and certainly one doesn't stride into that space with great confidence in terms of what will happen. That said, it is possible to estimate the shortfalls or surpluses that will accrue to councils, and that certainty increases as you go through the summer and into the autumn. I would also draw members' attention to the fact that we've recently had the comprehensive spending review, where the government set out its plans for the future. And on the back of that, we've had some really quite interesting conversations with the finance team at MHCLG, who have revealed that they are looking to set in place a multi-year settlement. They have announced the early production of the settlement information. And I think that both of those are a good thing, because what you tend to find is that where governments don't know what to do, the date of information release is later, and it's much earlier, which enables me to draw the conclusion that they have a vision, that they have, from Jim McMahon, the Minister for Local Government, someone who has a coherent vision of what he wants to achieve in the local government arena. And I think we will find that the settlement is somewhat less painful than we might fear. That's not to say that there aren't indeed some tax rises to be enjoyed somewhere in the economy, and I certainly agree with Councillor Woodliff on that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that one. We go on to Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go to page 193, and I think paragraph D, which is from point 3, existing process, key risks and issues. Generally, between brackets with some exceptions, there has been a pre-agreed and complete plan to balance corporate budgets, and then we go, to the pressures have been resolved through, I mean, if we're going to deal with the budget, for example, we need a good timing and accuracy in our figures. I mean, I support you on what you have said. And to add to that, probably we can run through a high risk of stuffing as well. So how can we do that if we need to deliver things in the proper way without putting, our departments under pressure?
So I think the point here is, and I'm sorry, I'm at risk of repeating myself, Chair, for which I apologise. But in the past, this all seems to have happened in a very time-constrained way. So constrained, in fact, that very few detailed proposals for cost reductions were fed into the budget, and the budget was eventually balanced by an efficiency target, which effectively was a balancing figure to make the budget work. Well, it is possible to take a view that that's actually not really balancing the budget at all. Now, I'm not saying that, and the external auditor has not said that, but nonetheless, what is certainly true is that if you enter the new financial year with a clear and detailed plan as to which cost reductions you are intending to adopt, then you have a much higher chance of meeting that financial target in that year. And it is notable that in looking at the 24-25 outturn figures, those outturn figures across the partnership and in Boston, we know about the £1 million that Ellie has reminded us this evening. Yes, they've been underspent, but actually the efficiency targets have in no single council been entirely met. And this process should enable that risk to be eliminated as we move forward. And once again, we're sitting here on the 7th of July, and we are in a process where officers are already considering what cost reductions could be devised in order to meet the case when we are able to forecast more accurately at the end of August what the financial shortfalls might be. And that is a huge gain in terms of time. So although I absolutely understand the stress of the past, it is my hope that this approach will eliminate that particular stress, which isn't to say that myself and my accounting colleagues, if it is me that's still here, won't have a lot to do in budget setting, because that's the nature of the beast. But as accountants, we kind of expect that to be the case, and that's sort of normal for us. But I hope that certainly colleagues in the service directorates will have an easier pace of life this time round than before. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Councillor Pryke.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a very good piece of work, and I wish it well. I hope it goes through, because it's a distinct improvement on what we've had before. But I worry slightly that it might be a 1 year only plan, because we're talking about the budget for 26-27 here, or the plans for the budget for 26-27. We may get the opportunity to work on a budget for later than 27, but this time next year, we will probably know how Lincolnshire is going to be dismembered by the government.
Yes.
But we probably won't know exactly how it's going to be reformed. So we won't know whether we're going to be merged with some of our colleagues or all of them. I know from colleagues in other parts of the country who've had local government reorganisation forced on them, that the proponents of the scheme always talk about the savings of doing so, but they never seem to mention the things that go wrong. So, for example, in Lincolnshire, we may go from 9 chief executive officers to 1, saving 8 salaries. But we've also got to think about 8 major redundancy programmes, which in other counties, particularly Cornwall and Somerset, cost those new councils so much money, they haven't made any savings from local government reorganisation.
Can I just ask you to give us a question that you're trying to get across, so we can clear?
My real question is, this is very good work, which I commend, and I hope we can use it for more than 1 year. I assume we're working with our colleagues in East Lindsey and South Holland on the same basis. Is there any merit in us thinking about sharing these ideas with other councils in Lincolnshire? Thank you.
Chair, the local government review process has some considerable time to go, and I think it would be a brave person who might say that every policy intention in government is delivered exactly at the time and to the exact specification that's envisaged at the start. So there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before vesting day, councils are abolished and a new council created. I'm sure that a great deal of governance, thought, energy, coherence and skill is going to be built into the proposals that emerge from the Lincolnshire community, and we shall have to see how that goes. However, we have to prepare this budget and the associated medium-term financial strategy as if the council is a going concern, and therefore that is what we are planning to do.
That's noted. Thank you very much. We're going to move on. I don't think any more questions from anybody else, as far as I know. We're going to move on. So the committee is asked to note and comments on the briefing, which we have done. The comments have been recorded by officers. Now we're going to go on to item 8, which is the work programme on page 201. Are there any questions on this? I'd like to raise one thing. I don't know whether this is the right moment and whether you can help me, John, on this one. I would be very keen for this committee to have a skills matrix, what each member of this committee offers the A&G committee, and to see whether there any shortage of any skills on this committee. I don't know whether that's something we could consider for a work programme.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think after this meeting, you've got a separate session to do a self-assessment. I'm looking at my colleague at the back of the room who's nodding her head, and I wonder whether the skills assessment might be something that you could pick up as part of that exercise following the conclusion of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other questions on the work programme? No? So we're taking this as read and they're happy. To note then, and then we'll move on. So the next one is item 9, exclusion. Oh, I probably can press, have we? I have to read this out, do I? Here goes. To consider resolving that under section 100 in brackets A, is that 4? 1 IV? Is that 6? 4? 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likelihood disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as amended. Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Bright proposes, Councillor Dunny seconders. All in favour? Nobody members of press in attendance anyway, so we can't ask them to leave. Okay, we'll stop the streaming then.